Pyro Unleashed presents the Finale3D Tip of the Week, sponsored by Finale Fireworks.
All right, well, here we are again, Donnie and Drew. Looks like episode 4.
Episode 4.
We're in different clothes this time. Probably the next episode will probably be in the same clothes, but that's all right. Yeah, we got music on the timeline now. We've got a 2D image on the ground, and it looks like we have 15 fronts and 3 shell positions. So I think let's go ahead and kick this off. So how would one go about adding effects to the timeline? And is there like restrictions based upon each one of these positions as to what can be put or cannot be put into each one of those positions?
Yeah, David, that's a good question. In terms of the restrictions piece, in Finale, there's not anything that's going to really prevent you from putting any particular kind of item in a position, other than the distinction between pyro effects and DMX effects. So when you're scripting pyro, Finale would allow you to put any pyro effect, whether it's a single shot or a candle or a sparkler or a 24-inch shell on any position.
Yeah.
When you get into DMX, like a flame machine or a spark machine, then the positions themselves, they look different, and they represent the actual DMX fixture itself. So the position becomes the light, or the position becomes the flame machine, or the position becomes the spark machine. So that's what you're seeing. So then in that case, if you try to add a DMX effect to a pyro position, it will give you an error. If you try to add an effect to a DMX position, then that would throw an error. But otherwise, it's really up to you to decide based on your artistic intentions and the restrictions for your shoot site and the safety distances that you have available, like what kind of effects you would put at each position. So it's really kind of like designer's choice.
Yeah. In
terms of the mechanics of adding an effect, there's actually a fair number of ways to do it, and there's a bunch of workflows in Finale. I'll start off by showing just the absolute simplest and most common, which is you would if you're designing a pyro musical show, even before you put product or effects onto the timeline, there's a good chance that you want to lay down some what we call empty cues or cue markers at certain spots in the music to be able to know exactly where you're going to want to add fireworks. So you don't have to do that, but that is an option that you have. So if you look at the script menu here, there's an option that says Insert Empty Cue. And the key thing to note here is, of course, you can click this menu item, but you can also just tap this keyboard shortcut, which is the I key. And to remember that, you can just think of I is for insert. So to insert an empty cue, you tap your I key. You can do this when the music is playing or when the music is stopped. So the beauty of this is the ability to hit play, to listen to the music, and then tap the I key. I'm not sure if the music will come through, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot here. So I'm gonna hit play, and then I'll listen to the music a little bit and tap the key. So there's something like that. So now I've got 2 empty cue markers on my timeline, which are represented by these vertical bars with the little flags. And then they're also represented as rows of empty cues in the timeline. So I pressed the I key twice at different points in the song, and that's why I have 2 cue markers. So if I wanted to insert an item into one of these cues, I could insert an item on a single position, or I could insert an item on multiple positions. The pyro effects are going to go into whatever set of positions are selected in the show. So effects, generally, in the simple case, they go into the positions that are selected at the time that's selected. So, for example, if I want them to be at the time of this first cue marker, I can just click on its flag, and that moves my playhead to that time. And then I can select a position. For example, if I want to go maybe the shell's position there in the back, I click on that position. And then I might come over and try to find something I want to drop in there. So maybe if I'm going to shoot a 3-inch shell, and I can click on the thumbnail icon for that shell, and that drops it in. And it drops it in based on its effect time. I know we talked about the timeline bars in a previous episode. So it's, that moment that you've selected in the music is intended to be the effect time, which is the burst time for that shell. And so that's automatically, launching the shell early to get it to burst or break at that moment.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to instead insert a bunch of effects, for example, you could select, I can go big here and I can hold shift on my keyboard and select all the front positions by drawing a selection box. And then I might come up and come over to my filter here and choose some single shots. And let's just take this first green tip gold comet, click the thumbnail icon, and bam. And because I have all of those positions selected and that time selected, that MTQ marker selected, that MTQ has now been replaced by these 15 items. So the MTQ is gone.
Yeah.
And what's taking its place is the items that I added at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And say maybe designing, you decide to switch the color scheme of that effect. Is there a simple way to grab all 15 of those effects and say,
like a replacement?
Like a replacement.
Yeah.
I want that 25 millimeter blue tip gold comet there instead.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So if I said, no, you have to start over, that would be crappy. So the answer is absolutely you don't. It's really simple to replace an item. So the steps are you select the items that you would like to replace. You select the new item, and then you can either right click on the new item or you can use a keyboard shortcut. So for example, it can be a little challenging sometimes based on the busyness of your timeline, how much is going on, to try to select items on the timeline. So it's good to know you can select items directly in the simulation. Same way you select positions, you can select items in the simulation. That can also be tricky if you have lots of layers of effects in the simulation. But you can also select items in the timeline, and you can also select items directly in the script window. And sometimes when your script is really you have a lot going on in your script at the same time because of the layers of your show. The easiest way to select things is, by selecting rows directly in the script window. So I'm just clicking my left mouse button and dragging to select these rows. So in your example, David, these were the items that you wanted to replace.
Correct.
And you said you wanted to use the blue tip gold comet.
Yeah.
So I can just select this row, and then I can right click on it, and I can choose replace with this effect. Rack doesn't apply because we're not dealing with racks right now. It's just a shortcut that's used for two different things. But generally, like as a power user, what you're going to do is just tap the Y key on your keyboard, which is the same as clicking this menu item. So just by clicking this, those items have now been replaced. So the angles remain the same, the positions remain the same. It's the same number of items, but we've just taken out. Even if those items were addressed, if they had module queue numbers, that would remain the same. We're just kind of swapping in one pyro effect for another. So now if we were to grab the playhead and scrub over, you'd see that those are now blue gold comets instead of the green ones we had before.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think one of the questions is, when you get all these laid out, obviously you can put these things at like different angles, and there's a lot of different, I think, values in Finale, like angles, tilt, pan. Like, what are some of those, and how can we see visually, what each one of those potentially represent on the screen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, there are really three angles. From a technical perspective, there are three different angle numbers that make up the angle convention. In the simplest case, the one that you really need to know is tilt. Tilt is generally, if you're in the most common case, you want to shoot something from the audience's perspective to the left or to the right to create an angle, and you can do that just using a tilt angle. And that's why the default view or layout of the script includes that particular column. So here we have the tilt column, and blank means 0. So all the effects that we put in our show so far are shooting straight up. It's 0 degrees, and blank is the same as is all the same. It means straight up. So if we want to angle these effects or angle just even this one shell, a simple and common way to do that is to follow the trajectory dots to the top, where you have what we call the little donut, or like the ring at the top of the trajectory. You can click on that, hold your mouse, and then drag it, and you get 5-degree increments when you angle this way. So if I wanted to shoot that shell at 20 degrees to the left from the audience's perspective, then just dragging that trajectory would allow me to do that.
Yeah.
When I do that, it puts a value in the tilt column of the script window. So it's exactly the same thing as hand keying in a number into the script window. So hypothetically, say we wanted to shoot that shell straight up, I could just hit the delete key on my keyboard on that value, and it's now straight up. If I wanted to angle that item 20 degrees to the right, I could just type 20, and now that item is tilted 20 degrees to the right. So the reason it can be really handy to use the user interface and the click drag is because you can angle a lot of things at once. So for example, if I have all of these items selected, which I just did, and the most common way I like to select items in the timeline is just clicking to the left or right of some items, holding my mouse down, and just dragging it over the stuff I want to select.
Yep.
So just sort of selecting the range of things I've moused over. And then the white highlighted trajectories, that indicates they're selected. And if I were now to grab one and then angle it, I'm angling all the effects at the same time that I've selected. So the shell's not changing because that guy's not selected right now, but everything else is. So
yeah,
that's the really simple version of angling, which is just angling changing the tilt angle. And I said there were three total angles. There are 2 other angles that are being manipulated behind the scenes, but for the simple case where you're just angling a single shot or a shell to the left or right, you don't even have to worry about those angles generally. But when we get into cakes, that's where you have to have a little bit more advanced knowledge of angles, especially if you specifically for angling cake. So I can give you a demo of that if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know one of the things I like to take a slice and then I can angle my slices, left to right. And sometimes we try to do that on Finale. Now all of a sudden your slice is shooting at you.
Yeah.
So you got to do some rotation to get them to kind of look good. So
let's see. What do you have some slices in here, right?
I do not. I don't believe I do have any
slices in here.
Not yet. No.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I might have some in my effects, my personal effect collection. Let's see what I got here. I'll just look for cakes, and then here's one. So this is a pretty common slice, like a 13-shot silver comet with red mine. I'm not sure if we mentioned this in a previous session. You can preview effects by clicking that little gold play icon.
Yeah.
If your icon is, if your column with the icons is real narrow, that play button is hidden. But if you widen out just a bit, and you can get that little play icon, and that makes it easier to get to to see what something's going to look like before you put it into the show. The way I got that to be larger was I clicked in the upper left-hand corner of the preview.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And if you want to pause, you can just click and hold your mouse to pause. That might be something you guys didn't know, and you guys are pretty.
Yeah, this is the new stuff here. Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is looping. The reason for the clock is to show you when the cake's starting over.
Yeah.
So it's just a single row slice cake, but it's looping that sim. So so that can be handy. Just widen the column out a bit so you're not, because if you accidentally click on the thumbnail icon, you're actually putting it in the show. So. All right, let's see here. So if we just put one of these guys in the show at a time when we don't have anything else, just so it's not on top of anything. So there it is. At the moment, it's just in its sort of normal default orientation, which is just it's resting flat on the ground and it's fanned left and right with respect to the audience. So with this cake, that would be a no angle. That would effectively be no angle. This is the way you would set the cake in the field if you weren't angling it, right? So you can, to go kind of give the example that Donnie's describing, so if we start grabbing this and angling it, the moment that we angle this left to right, you can see all of a sudden the cake doesn't look right. So I'll give you an example. I'll turn this over at 20 degrees to the left, and let's drag the playhead out so you can kind of see. It looks like the cake is really like something is horribly wrong. What's actually happened is the cake got rotated 90 degrees. So there's a technical reason for that, and it's super boring. So the best way to, and not also, I should say that we plan to make it work the way you would expect in the future.
Very good.
So instead of getting into like the long technical explanation for why things aren't the way you would expect, I think the best thing is to show like, how can a user fix this to get what you want?
Right. Yeah.
So the simple answer is, as I said, tilt is the basic angling mechanism. When you get into this kind of situation, you need to be familiar with the other. It's helpful to be familiar with the other two angles, which are called pan and spin.
Yeah.
And the reason that Finale has this angle convention is because it matches the angle convention that's used by moving headlights. And so it allows Finale to be used as a single application to script not only pyro, but moving, really complex DMX fixtures like moving headlights. So it has the same angle convention for that reason. In the case of angling cakes, though, it's just there's this little annoyance today. So to see the other angles, you can just go to the blue gear, and we won't at any point during our time together creating these videos be able to talk about every single column in the script window.
Yeah.
But there's lots of columns in the script window that have uses. So I just want to mention they're here, and you can explore what those are. We have also documentation on our website that walks through and has a definition, an explanation of each column in the script window, so you know what its purpose is and how you can use it. If you know what these do, there's a lot of really advanced things you can accomplish. But what we're after right now is pan and also spin. So I'm going to remove the other items in the show just right now, just so we can focus on the cake. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to remove some of these columns to make this easier to see. So I'm just going to hot right click to hide some of the columns that don't really affect what we're working on right now, just to try to make it easier to see what we're doing. So I'm going to hide the columns that are used for the addresses and other things here.
That's a nice little quick tip there.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so instead of going to the list and clicking to turn columns off, you can just right click on a column header and choose hide this column.
And it just deselects it.
Yeah.
Nice.
So here is now we have here our pan, tilt, and spin. So these are the columns that we're going to focus on for the purpose of angling a cake. So I'm going to remove both of these angles. These were the ones that got introduced when I grabbed onto that trajectory dot and angled that cake. So when I do that, let me get this in the spot where I can grab the trajectory. So you'll see as I drag this, that introduced the pan of 90 and the tilt of -5. So the pan is happening automatically, and you need the pan. And the reason is because, this is a bit technical, but it's useful to know, tilt is not actually left or right. Tilt is just the angle away from vertical. So tilt could be toward you, away from you, left, right. I'm sure I'm not pointing in the correct direction based on what I'm saying because we're on video and it's all mirrored and everything. But suffice it to say, think of a lawn sprinkler that pulses, right? That lawn sprinkler goes all the way around. That's the same tilt angle in Finale because it's always kind of shooting water at the same angle as it goes around. What it's actually doing is it's panning. And so in order for something to angle to the left, it just so happens to need a 90-degree pan. But the problem is when you do that, that's what's causing it's also causing the cake to get turned sideways. So you just have to counteract that. So spin, to make it even more complicated, is the third angle. And spin is the angle along the trajectory. So imagine you had a single shot comet in a holder, and you didn't angle it at all. You just turned the tube in your fingertips.
Okay,
yeah.
It wouldn't make any difference to the appearance of the show because it's a single shot. It's what we call visually symmetrical, right? The single shot, no matter whether you load it with the label facing you or the label facing to the left or the label facing the back, it's just a burning star that flies into the sky. So it looks the same, right? It's symmetrical. But for a cake that has a fan, that spin angle really matters.
Yeah.
And so we need to enter a spin angle to counteract the pan angle. It's stupid, It'll eventually be something that Finale does for you automatically. But right now, all you need to know is that if you enter the opposite angle, the negative of the pan angle, it just works the way you want.
Okay.
So if I want to angle this, Donnie's example was 20 degrees to the left. That'd be negative 20 on the tilt. The pan angle comes in at 90 automatically. And then I need to add a spin of negative 90. And there you can see now that item is shooting 20 degrees to the left with its orientation the way you'd expect.
Yeah.
So very cool. Very cool.
A little in the weeds there, but all you need to remember is if you want to angle the cake, put a spin of negative 90 when you have a pan of 90.
Perfect.
So now that I've got that, for that cake, I can put it anywhere I want.
Okay.
And it's going to still work.
Yeah.
So you can get into, I do want to mention, you can get into a little weirdness if we talked earlier about replacing effects, right? So we had one color single shot, we replaced it with another color single shot. You can also replace a cake with a single shot, replace a single shot with a cake. So cakes and single shots kind of rely on the angles being a little, not that the angle convention changes, but the angles that you need are a little different.
Yeah.
So if you start taking single shots that are angled and replacing them with cakes, or even a single shot that's straight up and replacing it with a cake, you might have your cakes kind of facing the wrong way. So you just be mindful if you replace one type of product with another type of product that you might have to tweak. You might have to go in and tweak the angles a little bit, or you might have a cake that's kind of facing the wrong direction. I want to show, while we're on the topic of cakes and specifically slices, I want to show one where this one is symmetrical, so it's not a great example. But if we go grab, I'll give you an example here real quick. Let's go grab a catalog that I can think of off the top of my head that has lots of sweeps and slices in it. Slices that are sweeps, I should say, probably. We got this brand new catalog of the Dominator product. I'm only picking on Dominator here because the catalog's new and so it's top of mind for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm seeing a lot of effects there that look like you're generating VDLs for them.
Yeah, we've been working hard on a lot of catalogs. This is just one that comes to mind real quickly. So we pop into the catalog now. What we've done in the Dominator catalog, a lot of the Dominator slice cakes, they have multiple ports. Yeah, and sometimes you might shoot them as a curtain, sort of from the center out, or you might shoot them as what might be called a sweep from left to right. And so we've got those simulated using, the way we've done that is with different part numbers. So this is actually one cake in the real world. The different part numbers are for the different potential firing patterns that you could get by the way that you match the cake. So I can just contrast these. Here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one. Sweep refers to the firing from one side to the other. It's always left to right by default. C to O means center to outside, and O to C means outside to center. So here's what that looks like. So here's sweeping from left to right. Here's your center out, and here's your outside center, right? So this is one E match on the left side of the cake. This is one E match in the center. This is two E matches you would need, one on each, the left and the right. But a really common question for this guy, because he's not symmetrical, is how do I just change this cake so it shoots from right to left? Do I have to make a brand new cake? The answer is no. You can rotate this cake around on the ground without having to do that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First, I'm going to unhide the notes column just because it's cool to see that a note gets added when I do this. So here's my notes column. I'm just going to select this cake, go to Script, Angles, and choose Rotate Cakes 180. It doesn't rotate all your cakes, don't worry. It only rotates the cake you selected, or cakes. If you select a bunch of cakes, it'll rotate all of them. But this here just changes that pan angle to negative 90, or excuse me, negative 180, which spins it around so that it's just like taking a cake in real life and turning it around 180 degrees on the ground so it shoots. So you don't have to make a new product for that in your inventory to shoot a cake from, to have it fan the other way from right to left. And Finale, when it inserts this pan angle, it automatically also adds a note that says 180. So when you print your script report to set up your show, as long as you're happy with that note and your crew knows what that note means, then you get that note automatically. You could manually punch in this pan angle too, and it would do the same thing, But then you also may want to go and have to, you'd have to manually put in a note to remind the crew which way the cake goes. So it's a cool feature to be able to, technically this is angling a cake. It's just not angling left or right. I angled it by, it's an angle. It's the angle of flipping it around 180 degrees. So
yeah, well, a lot of times in those cases, I'll put in the notes like left to right, L to R, R to L.
I'm very much with you. I prefer to be very anally retentive about it too. That way there can't be because if you get on a shoe site and it's 180, the question is, well, which way's the not 180?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So Donnie, that's a smart move. Like
it is interesting because I always just tell my crew label towards the crowd.
Yeah.
Which label?
Well, typically dominate. Right. Well, yeah. Typically dominate.
I don't think all the manufacturers always slap the label on the same side. That's
exactly.
And they might be thinking the Q label, the actual label that Finale generated, and that you might have stuck on the cake or stuck on the e-match wire, or who knows. So
yeah.
But if this note at least gets you started, so if you had a bunch of notes like this at the end of your show design, you could go through and find anything that had a note 180, and then you could put in L to R or L. And if we go back, let's not go back, but let's I think it'll be a little quicker to add those comments. Let's go ahead and add some comments back to this, just so you can see a few more items in the timeline. Let's filter to some single shots and drop in those. Yeah, this is arcane. We'll just drop in some red meteors here. So imagine that you've got a lot of stuff in your script. So I'm just going to add maybe more items to kind of cause the script window to have at some point you're going to have potentially hundreds of items or thousands of items in your script window, and you might not want to have to comb through to find out where the items that have notes are, or what items you might need to just kind of gussy up or polish at the end of the show design. So you can sort by any of the columns just by clicking on the column header. So for example, that brings anything with a note to the top. It basically just sorted the column in alphabetical order, and having something in there moves it up above anything that doesn't. But another thing you can do that's really cool, and I think this is a really underappreciated feature, is if you find something like note 180 and you want to just filter down and only view the lines of script that have that note, you could right click on it and choose filter to this value. And then Finale is going to automatically write a search expression for you in the search box that says script notes equals 180. And so now we didn't lose our show, but everything is hidden or filtered out that doesn't have that specific note. So in the case of this guy here, we've made him fire right to left. So using Donnie's nomenclature, I'll do R to L and click enter. And now I'm even more worried because now that's gone too. But the reason is because I'm only seeing items in my script right now that have that particular note. So if your objective was to go through and replace all your 180 notes with R to L or L to R, then we know we're done now because there's nothing shown. So we can clear that search and we're back, and there's that note we put in. So I get a lot of questions from people. Pyro Jam's going on right now. People say, how can I figure out how many effects I'm using at this position or that position? And it's knowing how to use the filters and the search capability in the script really makes it easy to kind of break your show down into bite-sized chunks and not have it be so overwhelming.
And now that you're kind of talking about that, isn't there a way to display how many cues are at a position right on the design window?
Yeah, there actually is in the I think this feature is only in the hobbyist and pro versions.
Okay,
of Finale, but what we've been running is pro. We've got Google Maps, so that's definitely a feature that's available to you in show settings. And we dove into show settings a little bit, and I said we'd come back to it later. This is a good time. You've got a lot of options for things you can change in show. One of the ones specifically is the pin counts, and so pin counts and cue counts. Cue is a really loaded word to Pyros because I don't know if this is the case in other languages, but in English, people use cue to mean different things. Some days people use cue to refer to everything that shoots at a specific time. And the next day they'll refer to cue as the little red and black speaker terminal on their firing system that's actually one pin. And it might take 50 pins to shoot a cue, but they'll call that one thing a cue and those 50 things a cue. And Finale has to differentiate because a cue can't be two things at the same time. So we say show the pin counts, which is how many circuits on the firing system you would need. And you can show those numbers based on the cues. And cues are items that have the same effect time in Finale, or based on the events. Events meaning each individual line of script is an event, or based on, typically, I would recommend doing, if you want the most accurate answer, do it based on the addresses. So if you set this based on the addresses, so if I select this, it says pin and module counts are based on cues or events or addresses. Cues count events at the same time as one, as if E matched together. Events count every row in the script, basically what I just said, right? And addresses are based on the address column. Well, here's what's happening. We're not seeing anything because we haven't addressed the show. So if we go back to our default layout here, here's our rail and pin column, which a lot of people would call module and cue or channel and cue. We call it rail and pin. It means the same thing, but we haven't populated that, so you're not seeing anything. So to avoid getting into addressing now, I'll go ahead and change that setting to be, let's see, show pin counts. And we'll just say based on events. Pretend you're going to use one E-match per cue or per pin, and you're not going to put E-matches in series or parallel. Then based on events would give you a good answer. So here now you can see I've seen numbers appended to the position names. So all my positions have 2 items except for this middle position F9, which has 3 items. That's because I've got this slice cake there. So yeah.
All right. Well,
all right, guys. I think that's a great episode 4 there for us there.
It was.
Got to kind of dive in there and look at the timeline a little bit and effects and the nice fun of the tilt and the pan and the spin and all those great numbers and how to utilize those.
Thanks for calling it fun. That's
right. And how and how you can utilize those to make sure that all of your stuff is angled properly. So yep. So I think that's going to put us a wrap on this episode here. Episode 5, we got some good stuff coming up. We're going to dive into next a little bit about, I think we're going to start asking Drew a little bit about VDL. Yeah. And that's a nice loaded topic to talk about. So, but again, you can go out to pyrounleashedpodcast.com, catch our website, catch some merch, Discord. And until we see you again in the next episode, go out there and unleash your inner pyro with us.
This has been another episode of Pyro Unleashed. Come back each week for more industry insights, technical tips, and awesome pyro designs. Have fun out there, be safe, and as always, remember to unleash your inner pyro with us.